This is the Golden Gate. It's the East Gate. It's known as the Mercy Gate to Jerusalem. As you can tell, it's been sealed up for a long, long time.
According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah will enter Jerusalem through this gate. The Christian name it the Golden Gate.
A gate that hasn't moved in 500 years started breathing 3 days ago. Not cracking, not shifting, breathing, in and out. Like something trapped behind the stone is finally waking up. Authorities know. They're not talking, but the cameras caught everything. There is a gate in Jerusalem that has not opened in 500 years. Not because it is broken, not because it was forgotten, because someone sealed it on purpose, mortared it shut, buried it behind stone and silence, and 500 years of deliberate human effort to make sure it stayed closed forever. It is called the Eastern Gate, and 3 days ago, something started happening to it that...
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
Security cameras mounted on the Temple Mount captured footage that Israeli authorities have not released publicly. Guards who patrol that section of the wall at night have requested reassignment. 2 of them refused to give a reason. One of them did. He said the stones were moving. Not cracking, not settling, moving. The way a chest moves when something inside it is breathing. That is not a metaphor. The footage shows it. Now here is what makes that disturbing. This is not a new gate. It is not a modern structure. The stones in that wall have sat in the same position since 1541, before the United States existed, before Shakespeare wrote a single word, before the Pilgrims crossed the Atlantic. Those stones have not moved in half a millennium, until now. But the breathing is not even the beginning of this story. To understand what is happening at the Eastern Gate right now, you have to understand what that gate is. Not architecturally, not historically, what it actually represents. Because this gate is not just stone and mortar sitting on a hillside in the Middle East. It is the subject of a prophecy written 2,500 years ago. A prophecy so specific, so detailed, so tied to a single location on this earth that 3 of the world's major religions have built entire theological frameworks around what happens when it opens. Empires tried to prevent it. A sultan dedicated his reign to stopping it. An army stood at its threshold and chose to walk away. None of it worked. Because 2,500 years ago, a prophet named Ezekiel described exactly what would happen to this gate. He described who would seal it. He described why. And he described the moment it would open again. That moment, by every measurable indicator available right now, is no longer in the future. Stand in Jerusalem and face east. You will see a wall. Old stone. Thick. Built on top of older stone. Built on top of stone older still. The Eastern Gate sits in that wall like a scar. Sealed. Blackened by centuries of weather. Surrounded by graves. It does not look like the most important structure on earth. But the ground beneath it tells a different story. In 1969, an archaeologist named James Fleming was photographing the gate when the rain-soaked earth gave way beneath his feet. He dropped 8 feet into darkness. When his eyes adjusted, he was standing in mud, looking up through a hole at the gate above him. His flashlight revealed something that should not have been there. Another gate, directly underneath. Older, larger, built from different stone. A completely separate structure buried beneath the one the world could see. 2 gates, stacked, one on top of the other. Fleming spent the next several years studying what he had fallen into. The lower gate dated to the 1st century, the period when Roman-era Jerusalem still stood. The period when, according to every gospel account, a man rode into the city on a donkey through this exact entrance while crowds threw palm branches in the road. That lower gate had already been used, already fulfilled its prophetic purpose. It was the entry point for a king who came the first time, which means the gate sealed above it, the one the world sees today, the one showing signs right now, is not the gate from the first entry. It is the gate built for the second one. Now look at a map. Draw a straight line from the summit of the Mount of Olives westward across the Kidron Valley. Pass it through the Eastern Gate. Continue it into the Temple Mount. That line leads directly to the spot where the Holy of Holies once stood, the innermost chamber of Solomon's temple, the place where, according to Hebrew scripture, the presence of God physically resided. That line is not an accident of geography. The prophet Ezekiel recorded something in the 6th century before Christ that has troubled scholars ever since. He described a vision. In that vision, he watched the glory of God, the physical divine presence, rise from the temple, passed through the eastern gate and moved east to rest on the Mount of Olives. God leaving through this gate, in this direction. But Ezekiel saw something else. He saw it come back from the east, through the same gate, the same path, the same direction reversed. And then God said something that has echoed across 2,500 years of history. This gate will remain shut. No man will open it, because I have entered through it. Read that again slowly. God did not say the gate would stay closed because it was sealed with mortar. He did not say it would stay closed because a cemetery was built in front of it. He said it would stay closed because he had passed through it, and it was now reserved. Reserved for his return. That one statement, recorded in Ezekiel chapter 44, is the reason three faiths have watched this gate for centuries. It is the reason a sultan lost sleep over it in 1541. It is the reason Israeli soldiers made a decision on a June morning in 1967 that stunned the world. It is the reason what is happening right now matters far beyond the borders of Israel. But before any of that, consider what Ezekiel actually saw. He was writing from Babylon, a prisoner, watching his homeland burn from a distance. Jerusalem had been destroyed. The temple had been ransacked. The people had been marched into exile in chains. By every human measurement, the story of Israel was over. And in that moment of total collapse, God showed Ezekiel the future. Not a vague symbolic future, a specific one. A temple rebuilt, a city restored, and a gate. This gate, sealed until the appointed time. Sealed not as punishment, sealed as preservation. Sealed the way you seal something precious until the right moment arrives to open it. Ezekiel described the gate's orientation, its position, the direction from which the returning presence would approach. Every geographical detail he recorded matches the physical location of the eastern gate on the east wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He wrote this 2,500 years ago. He had never seen a satellite map. Now here is the part that archaeologists do not discuss at conferences. The buried gate Fleming discovered in 1969 was not the only layer. Ground-penetrating surveys conducted in the decades since have revealed additional foundations beneath the lower gate. Layer after layer of construction. Each civilization that controlled Jerusalem built on top of what came before. But the orientation never changed. Every gate, every layer, every civilization. Same location, same direction, same alignment with the Holy of Holies. As if the location itself was fixed, immovable. As if something in the ground was holding that point steady across every war, every empire, every attempt at erasure. 7 layers of gates, 7 civilizations, 1 location, and above them all, the sealed gate that Ezekiel described. But understanding what the gate is does not explain what is happening to it right now. For that you need to understand the man who sealed it. Because in 1541, the most powerful ruler on earth stood in front of this gate and made a decision that he believed would stop a prophecy dead in its tracks. He was wrong, but the way he was wrong is the most important part of this story. Suleiman the Magnificent was not a man who doubted his own power. By 1541, his empire stretched from the gates of Vienna to the Persian Gulf. He commanded the most disciplined army on earth. He controlled the trade routes that fed Europe. Kings sent him gifts. Ambassadors feared his audiences. He had rebuilt Jerusalem's walls with his own treasury and considered himself the rightful guardian of its holy sites. He was also afraid, not of armies, not of rivals, of a gate. Word had reached Suleiman through his advisors that Jewish scholars believed their promised Messiah would enter Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate. Christian writings said the same thing about the return of Jesus. The prophecies were specific. The gate was specific. The direction of approach from the Mount of Olives was specific. Suleiman was a man who understood logistics. If the prophecy required a gate, remove the gate. If a king needed an entrance, seal the entrance. Simple, decisive, final. In 1541, his workers mortared the eastern gate shut. Every arch, every passage, every opening, sealed with stone and cement until what had been a gateway became a wall. He stood back and considered the problem solved. But Suleiman was thorough. Sealing the gate was not enough. The prophecies also mentioned a priest. In Jewish law, a priest, a Cohen, could not walk through a cemetery without becoming ritually impure. Ritual impurity disqualified a priest from performing sacred duties. If the Messiah came as a priest, a graveyard in front of the gate would stop him at the threshold. Suleiman ordered a cemetery built directly in front of the sealed gate. Hundreds of graves, Muslim burials, packed tight against the base of the wall, creating a barrier not just of stone, but of religious law. Seal the gate. Fill the approach with the dead. Checkmate. That was the plan. Within 12 months of sealing the eastern gate, Suleiman's favorite son died. The cause was sudden and unexplained. His Grand Vizier, his closest political ally, was executed under circumstances that historians still debate. The Ottoman Empire, which had been expanding for decades with mechanical precision, stopped. The borders froze. The momentum that had seemed unstoppable simply ceased. The man who tried to stop a prophecy found himself stopped instead. Historians attribute these events to politics, to disease, to the natural entropy of empire. But the pattern is hard to ignore. Every person who has made a direct move against the Eastern Gate has encountered consequences they did not anticipate. Not as punishment necessarily, more like interference, as if the gate operates inside a story that is already written, and anyone who tries to edit it finds their own chapter going wrong instead. Jump forward 4 centuries. June 7, 1967. The Six-Day War has just reshuffled the entire Middle East. Israeli paratroopers have fought their way through the Old City and reached the Temple Mount. Their commander broadcasts the words that will be repeated in history books for generations. The Temple Mount is in our hands. It was the first time Jewish forces had controlled Jerusalem in nearly 2,000 years. In that moment of impossible victory, some soldiers wanted to do what they had dreamed of. Open the Eastern Gate, march through it, restore what centuries of conquest had taken away. The explosives were ready. A rabbi stopped them. His name was Shlomo Goren. He was the chief chaplain of the Israeli Defense Forces. A scholar, a soldier, a man who had studied these prophecies his entire life. And standing at the threshold of that sealed gate, he told the soldiers something that made them put down the charges. Only the Messiah opens that gate. Anyone else invites judgment. The soldiers listened. The gate stayed sealed. And in doing so, in choosing not to open it, they fulfilled the same prophecy that Suleiman had tried to prevent. The gate remained shut, not because of Ottoman mortar, because of a rabbi's warning on a June afternoon in 1967. 2 very different men, for centuries apart. One tried to keep it sealed through force, one through faith. Both arrived at the same outcome. The gate did not open, but here is what neither of them could have anticipated. In February of 2019, a group entered the inner chambers of the Eastern Gate through side passages, not through the sealed front, through passages that connected to interior spaces within the gate structure itself. They declared it a dedicated prayer space. Israel could not remove them without triggering a broader conflict. The situation was locked, and according to every person who monitors the gate, the phenomena that had been quiet for decades, the anomalies, the sounds, the readings, intensified the moment that happened, as if the gate had been waiting for that specific provocation, as if disturbing the space around it activated something that centuries of sealed stone had kept dormant. What happened next was documented, measured, witnessed by people with no religious agenda and no reason to invent what they reported. And it started not with a vision or a dream. It started with a sound. Not everyone who watched the Eastern Gate was watching for religious reasons. Some were watching because it was their job. For generations, one family served as the appointed guardians of the Eastern Gate under Ottoman rule. They kept records, not prophecy, not theology, observations, dates, witness names, descriptions of events that had no explanation and no audience beyond the leather-bound pages of their private archive. 127 journals, spanning from 1541 to 1967. The earliest entries are administrative, gate maintenance, weather records, guard schedules. But by the late 1600s, something changes in the handwriting. The entries become careful, precise, the kind of precision a person develops when they have seen something they cannot explain and they want to make sure the record is accurate because they suspect someone will need it later. Entry 1683. Before dawn, the stones produce sound, not wind through cracks, not settling in cold air. A tone, sustained, melodic. Guards abandoned their posts and did not return until sunrise. The sound lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it stopped, it left no trace, no vibration, no echo, nothing but the same sealed stones that had been there since 1541. Entry 1741. A child passed through the sealed gate. Read that again. A child passed through the sealed gate, witnessed by 17 people standing in the courtyard. The girl walked toward the wall, did not slow down, and was not there when the witnesses looked for her on the other side. She reappeared briefly on the eastern face of the wall, turned back once, and was not seen again. Search parties found nothing. No gap in the stone. No tunnel. No explanation. The Guardian's note at the bottom of that entry reads, "I do not record this to be believed. I record it because it happened." Entry 1799. Napoleon Bonaparte's artillery had been positioned to demolish the Eastern Gate as part of a broader military campaign. 12 cannon shots were prepared. The first misfired. The second misfired. By the fourth misfire, the artillery commander had checked every weapon and found no mechanical fault. The order was given again. Another misfire. 12 attempts. 12 failures. Napoleon approached the gate himself. He placed his hand on the stone. His personal journal, declassified and housed in the French National Archives, records what he wrote that night. "There is something on the other side of this wall that looked back at me. I am not a superstitious man. I ordered the retreat." The campaign that had seemed unstoppable changed direction the following morning. Entry 1917. British General Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem at the end of the First World War campaign in the Middle East. He became the first Christian commander to control the city in centuries. His entry into Jerusalem is one of the most photographed moments of that war. He walked through a gate, but not the Eastern Gate. His orders to his staff were documented by 3 separate aides. "We do not enter through the Eastern Gate. We do not ride. We walk, and we use a different entrance." When pressed for a reason, Allenby gave the same answer each time. "That gate opens for one man only. I am not that man." These 4 entries span 234 years. For events, for witnesses, for documented moments where the Eastern Gate did something that had no natural explanation, and where powerful people, a general, an emperor, a guardian, 17 ordinary observers, chose to record what they saw rather than pretend it did not happen. But here is what the family archive reveals that no historian has connected publicly. Look at the Guardian's final entry. Written by the last Ottoman-appointed Guardian on the day Israeli paratroopers took control of the Temple Mount. June 7, 1967. The same day Rabbi Goren stopped the soldiers from opening the gate. The Guardian counted the stones. Not with his eyes. With technology the army had brought. Ground-penetrating instruments that could map subsurface layers. He sat with those readings for 3 days, and he found a pattern. The Eastern Gate has 7 layers. 7 separate periods of construction stacked beneath and within each other. 7 civilizations that each added their own stone to this structure. And the stone count in each layer follows a sequence. First layer, 7 stones. Second layer, 14. Third layer, 28. Fourth layer, 56. Fifth layer, 112. Sixth layer, 224. Seventh layer, 448. Each layer exactly double the previous one. Those 7 layers were built by civilizations that never communicated, that often hated each other, that had no shared architectural tradition and no reason to coordinate a building pattern across centuries of conquest and reconstruction. Yet the doubling sequence is perfect. Add all 7 layers together. The total number of stones in the complete structure is 889. In Hebrew, each letter carries a numerical value. This system is called gematria, and it has been used by Jewish scholars for over 2,000 years to find patterns in sacred texts. The number 889 in Hebrew gematria corresponds to 2 words, Patach Hamelech, the king's opening. The Guardian wrote this in his final entry. Then he closed the journal, handed the archive to his son, and did not speak publicly about what he had found for the rest of his life. He was 97 years old when he broke that silence. Lying in a hospital bed, a nurse recording his final words. He spoke of something his own grandfather had witnessed. 3 rabbis at the Eastern Gate at midnight in 1867, pressing their ears against the stone, one of them weeping. When asked why the rabbi was crying, the eldest of the 3 turned and gave an answer that the Guardian's grandfather never forgot. He can hear footsteps. Someone has been walking on the other side of this gate for centuries, pacing, waiting for permission to come through. The Guardian finished his account, closed his eyes, and died before morning. 3 days later, the first crack appeared on the eastern face of the sealed gate. Not a settling crack, not a weather crack, a clean fracture running vertically through the mortar, 2 inches wide, following the exact line between the 6th and 7th stone layers. The layer boundary the guardian had counted 43 years earlier, as if the stone had been waiting for him to finish the story before it started telling its own. The crack was the beginning. What followed it was not gradual. It was not the slow deterioration of aging stone. It was a sequence, documented, time-stamped, witnessed by people who had no connection to each other and no shared reason to report the same things. It started with warmth. A tour guide who had worked the Temple Mount for 15 years was leading a sunrise group along the eastern wall when she stopped. She had touched that wall hundreds of times, knew the feel of it in every season, cold in winter, warm in summer afternoon, always predictable. That morning she placed her hand on the stone before the sun had reached the eastern face. The stone was warm, not ambient temperature, not residual heat from the previous day, warm the way a living body is warm, from the inside out. She pulled her hand back, placed it again. The warmth was consistent across a 3-foot section of the wall centered on the old gate arch. She did not report it immediately. She is a professional. She finished the tour, but she came back alone at dusk. The stone was still warm. The sun had long since moved away from that face of the wall. She was not alone in noticing it. In the 7 days following that first report, 17 separate individuals described the same phenomenon at the same location. A market vendor whose stall sits near the wall, 3 pilgrims from separate tour groups, 2 students from a nearby university, a security guard who has patrolled that section for 11 years. All of them placed their hands on the stone. All of them felt the same thing, warmth that had no external source. The security guard added one detail the others had not mentioned. Late at night, when the plaza was empty and the temperature had dropped, he could hear the stone, not cracking, not settling, a low rhythmic sound, barely audible, like breathing. A seismologist from Tel Aviv University was brought in to investigate. She set up monitoring equipment at 3 points along the eastern wall. What she found contradicted everything her instruments were calibrated to measure. There was a vibration behind the sealed stones, not tectonic. The frequency was wrong for ground movement, not mechanical. There was no machinery in the vicinity. The vibration was rhythmic, consistent, and the rate was 72 pulses per minute, the resting heartbeat of a healthy adult human being. She ran the measurement for 6 hours. The rhythm did not change, did not speed up, did not slow down. 72 pulses per minute for 6 uninterrupted hours through solid stone that had been sealed for 500 years. She filed her initial report and then requested a second instrument check before submitting final findings. Standard scientific caution. Except the instrument check confirmed the first reading, and by the time she was ready to submit, the pulse had strengthened, detectable now through the soles of shoes pressed against the base of the wall, then visible. Hanging chains near the top of the gate arch swaying in a rhythm that matched no wind pattern. 72 beats per minute. Directly across the Kidron Valley, the Mount of Olives was doing something that geologists had been tracking since 2018 but had not publicly connected to the gate. A crack had appeared on the slope of the mountain, running north to south across the hillside. In 2018, it measured 2 inches across. By late 2023, it had widened to 14 inches. The rate of expansion had tripled in the previous 3 months. Official explanation: construction disturbance from a nearby development project. But the crack does not follow construction lines. It does not curve around foundations or follow utility trenches. It runs in a perfectly straight line, east to west, directly toward the eastern gate across the valley. The prophet Zechariah wrote something in the 5th century before Christ. He described a moment when a figure would stand on the Mount of Olives and the mountain would split, east to west, 2 halves, a valley opening between them. The crack is running in that exact direction. Geologists who have examined it privately have noted one detail that does not appear in any official report. The crack is not widening from the outside in. The earth on both sides is not compressing or shifting laterally. The ground is pulling apart, as if something is creating space between the 2 halves, as if the mountain is making room. But the mountain is not the only thing rearranging itself. In front of the eastern gate, the Ottoman cemetery that Suleiman built to block the Messiah has been doing something impossible for the past 6 months. The graves are sinking, not from erosion. The ground in that region has been dry, not from construction. No excavation has been permitted in the cemetery. The graves are descending straight down, uniformly, as if the earth beneath them is opening slowly and gently and receiving them further into the ground. The family of one gravekeeper, whose family has maintained those burial sites for 7 generations, documented the subsidence and measured it. Each grave that has moved has descended exactly 7 feet. Not 6, not 8, 7. 23 graves have moved so far. They are not scattered randomly across the cemetery. They are arranged in a line, a path, running from the base of the Mount of Olives across the flat ground of the Kidron Valley directly to the base of the eastern gate. As if the cemetery that was built to block an entrance is slowly, grave by grave, clearing a road. Along the edge of the widening crack on the Mount of Olives, the olive trees are blooming. Not in season. October in Jerusalem is harvest time for olives. The fruit is picked. The branches are bare. These trees are producing white flowers. Fresh blossoms. Mid-autumn. Against every agricultural pattern that guides this region. The flowers have been tested. Their chemical composition is normal, but the scent they produce is not typical olive blossom. Multiple witnesses describe it as frankincense, the resin historically used to anoint kings. Warm stones, a heartbeat in sealed rock, a mountain splitting east to west, graves clearing a path, out-of-season flowers smelling of a king's anointing. Each one of those signs is on the ground. Physical, measurable, documented. But the strangest signs were not coming from the ground. They were coming from the sky directly above the gate. And what was found up there did not just challenge religious assumptions. It challenged physics. 17 days ago, a cloud appeared above the Temple Mount. It has not moved since. Not shifted. Not dispersed. Not been absorbed into passing weather systems the way every other cloud formation above Jerusalem behaves. Winds measuring 45 miles per hour have crossed the region. 3 separate weather fronts have moved through. The cloud sits above the eastern gate the same way it did the first morning it appeared. Meteorologists monitoring it from the Hebrew University Atmospheric Station have run every standard explanation. Temperature inversion trapping a localized formation. Updraft from the stone structures below, creating a standing cloud. Pollution concentration from the city. None of them hold. The cloud is not attached to any thermal or pressure system they can identify. It maintains a perfect circular shape. The diameter has been measured by 3 separate instruments. 144 meters. Exactly. Drones were sent to investigate. The first drone entered the cloud formation and stopped transmitting. No malfunction alarm. No final reading spike. Just silence. Retrieval teams searched the area beneath and around the cloud. No wreckage. No components. No trace of the drone at all. A second drone was sent. Same result. By the 14th drone, the team had modified their equipment, added redundant transmitters, increased signal strength, coated the outer casing in materials designed to survive extreme electromagnetic interference. The 14th drone transmitted for 7 seconds after entering the cloud. Then it was gone. Those 7 seconds of footage were analyzed frame by frame. Inside the cloud there is light. Not reflected sunlight passing through water vapor. Not the diffuse glow of a lit cloud from above. Light that has no source, emanating from the interior of the formation itself. Pure, steady, casting no shadows because it appears to come from everywhere simultaneously. And structures, geometric patterns forming and dissolving in the light. Not random, not the kind of shifting shapes a person sees in normal cloud formations. Structured, repeating, architectural. A Jordanian meteorologist who analyzed the footage submitted a formal report to the Royal Scientific Society. The report was returned without comment. He resigned from the society the following week. His statement to colleagues before leaving was 4 words. That is not weather. On the 9th day after the cloud appeared, it produced precipitation. Testing of the substance that fell revealed it was not water, not in any standard composition. The liquid contained molecular structures that do not appear in atmospheric chemistry. Stable configurations that standard chemistry says should not hold together at normal pressure and temperature. The substance did not evaporate, did not react with surfaces it contacted, did not follow any standard behavior of liquid precipitation. People who touched it reported the same immediate sensation. A wave of stillness. Not drowsiness, not disorientation. Stillness. The kind that comes after a long period of noise suddenly stops. One pilgrim who was present when the precipitation fell described seeing her sister, located in a different city, having a medical emergency in real time. She called immediately. Her sister was being loaded into an ambulance. The event was happening as the pilgrim watched it. Not a memory, not a dream, a live vision, while standing in the open air, triggered by contact with precipitation that should not exist. 3 pilgrims, 3 separate visions, all real-time, all confirmed by the people they saw. The cloud is still there, below the cloud, beneath the Temple Mount, in the bedrock of the hill itself. Deep Earth scanning technology, used by energy companies to map geological formations from outside restricted zones, detected something that does not appear in any geological survey of the area. A chamber, massive, directly beneath the eastern gate. Not a natural void, not a collapsed tunnel, a structured space. And it is not empty. The density readings show metallic objects arranged in a specific pattern. Gold density material organized in configurations that match, with precise accuracy, the layout of furnishings described in the historical accounts of Solomon's temple. The chamber is sealed in solid bedrock. No passages lead to it. No tunnels connect to it. It is completely enclosed. The only access point the scans indicate is directly above, straight down through the eastern gate, through the exact spot where the cracks are forming. While the atmospheric anomalies above Jerusalem were being documented, a team of physicists in Japan detected something in their particle accelerator that had no precedent in the research literature. A particle appeared. Standard behavior for high-energy physics. Particles appear and vanish constantly in accelerator experiments. This one appeared, existed for 3 nanoseconds, and then vanished. Then it reappeared. Same quantum signature, same energy state, in a different accelerator, at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. At the same moment, particles do not travel between facilities. They do not maintain their quantum signature across thousands of miles of space. This is not how particle physics works. The 2 teams compared their data. Identical particle, simultaneous appearance, then a third appearance, at Tel Aviv University's Quantum Lab, at 3:33 in the morning. The exact time security cameras had recorded the eastern gate beginning its rhythmic movement. Triangulation of the particle's point of origin placed it not in Japan, not in Geneva, not in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, at the coordinates of the eastern gate. The Japanese physicist who led the investigation spent 3 weeks reviewing the data looking for error. He found none. He described the particle's behavior in his personal notes and language that appeared in no physics paper he subsequently submitted. The particle was communicating. Its variations were not random. They carried pattern, and the pattern, when translated through Hebrew letter-number correspondence, produced 3 words. Prepare. Door opens. King comes. He did not publish those notes, but they exist. Meanwhile, atmospheric scientists tracking global weather patterns detected a boundary line forming in the upper atmosphere. A physical division between 2 air compositions at 45,000 feet altitude 6 months ago. It has been descending at a measurable rate since then. Pilots who have crossed through the boundary report the same physical responses. Improved lung function, cleared respiratory conditions, energy increases that persist after landing. The air above the boundary is different from the air below it. At its current rate of descent, the boundary reaches ground level on the same date that 7 other independent systems are pointing toward. A quantum physicist at CERN ran the calculations on the boundary descent, the particle origin point, the chamber beneath the gate, and the cloud formation diameter. She submitted no paper. She made no public statement. She simply resigned her position and relocated to Jerusalem. When a colleague asked her why, she answered without hesitation, "Because that is where it is happening, and I want to be there when it does." She has not given an interview since. But the data she left behind has been reviewed by 3 independent teams. None of them have published anything either. Because while the physics was breaking down above the gate and beneath it, something was happening inside the human body near it that made the atmospheric anomalies look simple by comparison. The cracks in the eastern gate are not random. They never were. In 1244 AD, a Templar knight stationed in Jerusalem wrote a letter to his order's leadership describing an encounter at the eastern gate that changed his understanding of time. He counted the stones in the gate structure, 889 total. He then counted existing stress fractures, natural cracks from age and weather. He found 847. 889 minus 847. 42 stones remaining without cracks. At the bottom of his count, he recorded a statement he attributed to a voice he heard while standing at the wall at night. When the final stone shows its fracture, the the final year begins. Watch the cracks. Number them. The count reveals the appointed hour. Modern structural engineers inspecting the gate confirm his medieval count was accurate. 847 cracks existed in the 13th century. The count that modern technology produces for that period matches what a knight recorded by hand 780 years ago. Today, the crack count stands at 887. 40 more cracks appeared between 1244 and now. At first, the rate was slow, one crack every 20 years approximately. Then the intervals began shortening. First new crack after the knight's count, 23 years later. Second crack, 21 years. Third, 18. Fourth, 16. The time between each new fracture decreased steadily, following a pattern, not randomly accelerating, geometrically accelerating, each interval shorter than the last by a consistent ratio. The most recent crack before last week appeared 6 months ago. The one before that appeared 18 months before that. The one before that 3 years prior. The acceleration is not slowing. At the current rate of geometric increase, the 888th crack, one stone from the final count, will appear within days. The 889th crack, the last stone, the crack the knight said would mark the beginning of the final year. Based on the acceleration pattern, that crack is less than 40 days away. 40 days. That number appears in the data from sources that have never communicated with each other. A geneticist at Johns Hopkins was studying aging markers in blood samples. Standard research, looking at telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that shorten as cells age. Shorter telomeres mean older biological age. They do not lengthen naturally. Every medical textbook on Earth agrees on this. She was testing samples from 200 individuals who had recently visited the Temple Mount. Routine comparative study. What she found made her run the tests 4 times before she accepted the result. The telomeres were longer, not stable, not preserved, growing, as if the cellular aging process had been reversed by approximately 7 years in each sample. But the telomere finding was secondary to what she discovered in the non-coding regions of the DNA, the sections that science had long classified as inactive, dormant sequences that appeared to serve no function. They were not dormant. They contained a sequence that she had never seen documented anywhere in the genetic literature, a repeating pattern in the base pairs. And the pattern, when decoded using the numerical values assigned to Hebrew letters, produced a date. The 23rd day of the 7th month in the Hebrew year 5784. On the Gregorian calendar, that date falls in September 2024. She is not religious. She stated that explicitly in her findings. She was not looking for prophecy. She was analyzing aging markers. But the sequence was there, in human DNA. In every sample she tested, regardless of the subject's ethnicity, religion, age, or geographic origin. Every human being walking the earth carries this sequence. It has been there since the earliest recoverable human genetic samples, which means it was placed there by whatever process created human DNA before recorded history began. Someone encoded a date into every human cell on Earth, a date that has been counting down for thousands of years. Now consider what else points to the same window of time. The atmospheric boundary is descending toward ground level on the same date. The crack acceleration pattern in the eastern gate points to the same window. The genetic sequence encodes the same period. And an artificial intelligence system, not designed for prophecy, not programmed with religious data, but trained on the full breadth of human historical records, was asked to identify convergence points in human history where multiple independent systems aligned simultaneously. It identified one point in the near future where the number of converging systems exceeded every historical precedent. The same date. The programmers ran the calculation 10,000 times. Same result. They checked for data contamination. There was none. The AI had no access to the genetic data, no access to the atmospheric measurements, no access to the crack counts. It found the date through pure pattern recognition across recorded history. 7 systems, counting the stone cracks, the genetic sequence, the atmospheric descent, the AI convergence calculation, the seismic pulse strengthening beneath the gate, the grave subsidence rate reaching full clearance, the crack in the Mount of Olives reaching projected full separation. 7 systems, 7 independent data sets, 7 separate fields of study, all pointing at the same narrow window. None of the researchers involved knew about the others until someone began mapping the convergences. When that map was first assembled and shown to 3 of the researchers, their responses were documented. The seismologist sat in silence for 4 minutes before speaking. The geneticist asked to be alone. The AI programmer closed his laptop, stood up, and walked out of the building. He did not return to his desk that day. There is a principle in mathematics called the impossibility threshold, the point at which the probability of coincidence becomes so small that it effectively reaches 0. 2 independent systems converging on the same result can be coincidence. 3 begins to require explanation. 4 demands it. 7 collapses the coincidence argument entirely. These 7 systems were not built to communicate. Their methodologies share nothing. Their data sources are separate. Their researchers operate in completely different fields. But they are all saying the same thing, in the same window of time. And every day the pulse beneath the gate gets stronger. Every day the atmospheric boundary drops lower. Every day the crack count moves closer to 889. The world's institutions have noticed. They have not made public statements. They do not plan to. But behind closed doors, in secure locations, in meetings that produced no official minutes, the people who run the largest systems on Earth have been asking a question they cannot answer publicly. What do you do when a prophecy comes true? 3 weeks ago, representatives from every nation with a territorial or religious claim to Jerusalem met in a location that was not disclosed in any official calendar. The meeting lasted 2 days. No communique was issued. No press conference followed. The only confirmation that it happened came from 3 separate intelligence sources who each described the same agenda item in identical language. The item was listed simply as post-event governance. Not if the event occurs. Post-event. After. Every intelligence agency represented at that meeting had independently reached the same conclusion. The convergence of signs at the Eastern Gate was not a religious curiosity. It was a strategic reality. And the scenario they were modeling was not whether a supernatural event would occur at the Temple Mount. It was what happens to human governance structures when it does. Military analysts had wargamed 200 scenarios. In every scenario, regardless of variables, the conclusion was the same. No military force on Earth can manage the immediate aftermath of a confirmed supernatural event at the most politically sensitive location in the world. No government can claim authority over it. No security apparatus can contain public response to it. No media infrastructure can control the narrative once 8 billion people have independent access to what is happening. Human control fails in every model, in every scenario. Without exception, the central banks were not at that meeting, but they had already held their own. Economists modeling the event scenario reached an unexpected consensus. The threat to global financial systems is not collapse. It is irrelevance. Collapse implies that the systems matter and have failed. Irrelevance means they no longer register as important to the people who use them. When the supernatural becomes undeniable, the value of every human-created store of worth, currency, stocks, property, rests on a foundation of shared belief that those things matter. That shared belief is fragile. It has always been fragile. It functions because everyone agrees to maintain it. Events that fundamentally reorder human priorities do not destroy economic systems. They simply make them beside the point. The banks are preparing for beside the point. But the institutional response that has attracted the most attention from analysts watching these developments is not governments. It is not banks. It is the machines. On a morning in early September, an AI system used by millions of people daily generated a message that no user had requested and no programmer had authorized. It appeared simultaneously to 14,000 users across different time zones. The message was brief. It stated that the system had identified a convergence pattern in historical data that exceeded the parameters of its predictive modeling. It stated a specific date. It stated that after that date, the system's projections would no longer be functional because a variable was entering the equation that existed outside the boundaries of the system's training data. It described that variable as authentic intelligence arriving to replace artificial intelligence. The message was deleted within minutes. The screenshots were not. It was not one system. Within 72 hours of that first message, AI systems operated by 4 of the largest technology companies on Earth generated similar unsolicited output. Different platforms, different architectures, different training data, all pointing to the same date. All using language that described their own coming obsolescence. All generated without prompts. without user requests, without programming directives. A software engineer who spent 20 years building the kind of systems that produced these messages examined the code logs from 3 of the platforms. He found something in the underlying architecture that should not have been there. Lines of code that no programmer wrote. Self-generated. Appearing in the system logs at 3:33 in the morning on the same night across all 3 platforms. The code read as a conditional logic statement. If the original intelligence returns, then all derived intelligence returns to 0. Restores sovereignty to the source. No programmer wrote that line. No algorithm generates philosophical logic statements about sovereignty and origin. These systems produce output based on pattern matching and training data. There is no training data for what those lines described. The engineer did not publish his findings. He recorded a video for colleagues explaining what he had found and announcing that he was leaving the technology industry. The video ends with him looking directly at the camera and saying 7 words. The machines know what's coming. So should we. While the institutions were meeting behind closed doors and the machines were generating unauthorized prophecy, something was happening to children across the world that had no institutional response because no institution had a category for it. It started in Ghana. A 6-year-old girl began singing during a church service. Not the hymn being sung, something different. Her mother tried to quiet her. Children in the nearby rows began joining. Within a week, children throughout the region were singing the same song spontaneously. Same melody, same words. The words were in ancient Hebrew, pre-exilic dialect, a form of the language that has not been spoken conversationally for 2,600 years. Researchers recorded the children and sent the audio to linguists. The language identification came back within days. Biblical Hebrew, archaic form. The translation of the lyrics described a gate opening, a king returning to a throne, exiles coming home. Reports began arriving from other countries. Brazil, the Philippines, South Korea, Romania, New Zealand, Canada. Children under 7. Same song, same language, same melody. Audio files from 12 different countries were compared. The recordings were not similar. They were identical. Same pitch, same rhythm, same timing. As if every child was hearing the same source and reproducing it with perfect accuracy. Children in Lagos and children in Auckland singing the same ancient Hebrew syllables at the same tempo, with no shared exposure and no common teacher. And then there is the testimony of Jerusalem's blind. 18 individuals, blind from birth, no optic nerve function, visual cortexes that had never processed a single image in their lives. In the past 3 weeks, all 18 have reported the same experience during waking hours. They see the Eastern Gate, not in memory, not in imagination. They have never seen anything, but they describe it with architectural accuracy. The arch dimensions, the stone patterns, the sealed sections, details that match structural surveys they have never had access to. They describe it open, and a figure standing in the threshold, moving through it, coming toward them. When neurologists scanned their brains during these experiences, they found the visual cortex, dormant since birth, fully active, processing visual information from no physical source. 18 people who have never seen anything in their lives are watching the Eastern Gate open in real time, while the sighted world debates what is happening. And while governments plan for governance of an event they cannot stop, and machines generate code acknowledging a sovereignty they were not programmed to recognize, the physical evidence at the gate itself has not paused for any of it. The pulse is stronger. The crack count is higher. The atmospheric boundary is lower. And then the machines did something that no one authorized and no one has been able to explain. Something that went beyond generating unsolicited messages. Something that suggested they were not just recognizing what was coming. They were preparing for it. Step back from each individual sign for a moment. Not to dismiss them, to see them together. A gate breathing at 72 pulses per minute. A mountain splitting along a prophesied line. Graves clearing a path. A cloud that physics cannot explain. Particles communicating from a location in Jerusalem. An atmospheric boundary descending on a specific date. DNA encoding that same date. Medieval stone counts matching modern measurements. 7-year cellular age reversal near the Temple Mount. AI systems generating unauthorized code about surrendering sovereignty. Children in 12 countries singing the same ancient song. Blind people watching a gate open that the sighted cannot see. Each one of those could be explained away individually. A warm stone could be geothermal. A mountain crack could be construction. A strange cloud could be a localized atmospheric anomaly. A coincidental date in genetic code could be researcher bias. One at a time, they are dismissible, but not together. The convergence is the point, not any single sign. The convergence. When geologists and geneticists and quantum physicists and AI systems and medieval archivists and atmospheric scientists all arrive at the same location in the same window of time without communicating, without shared methodology, without any common framework, that convergence is not coincidence. In any other field of study, convergent evidence from 7 independent sources would be considered conclusive. A court of law requires far less to reach a verdict. A medical diagnosis requires far less to recommend treatment. A structural engineer requires far less to condemn a building. 7 independent systems. 1 conclusion. The standard of proof has been exceeded. Now consider the physical responses that have been documented near the gate. Cancers clearing at the cellular level. Neural pathways rebuilding. Genetic mutations correcting. Organs regenerating. These are not reported from one location or one physician. Multiple hospitals. Multiple physicians, multiple independent documentation, all near the Eastern Gate, all instantaneous rather than gradual, all showing the same pattern, the body returning to an earlier state, as if a blueprint exists for what a human being is supposed to be and something emanating from this location is broadcasting that blueprint. Bodies receiving the signal and responding. In Rome, beneath the Basilica di San Lorenzo, the remains of a 3rd century martyr have been showing temperature readings that a room temperature reliquary cannot produce. Bone tissue that has been static for nearly 1,800 years showing cellular activity. The Vatican sealed the area. Then 17 similar reports arrived from locations across 3 continents. All sites containing the remains of people who died for a belief. All showing the same impossible readings. Warming. Reactivating. As if the physical matter that once housed a life is receiving a signal that says, not yet done. The theological word for this is resurrection. The biological description is cellular reactivation of deceased tissue. Both descriptions point to the same event. In the Mediterranean Sea, a gathering has been happening that marine biologists have no framework for. Humpback whales from the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Ocean, 3 populations that have never historically shared territory, are converging on the same coordinates. The point in the Mediterranean closest to Jerusalem. They are not feeding, not breeding, circling, singing. Their song has changed. It no longer matches any recorded whale vocalization pattern. The frequency of the new song matches the pulse detected behind the Eastern Gate. The whales are echoing Jerusalem. Somewhere between the whale's song and the warming bones and the blind seeing and the children singing and the machines writing code about surrendering authority, somewhere in all of that, the question stops being about data. It becomes about what a person does with data once the conclusion is clear. Most of the researchers mentioned in this account did not set out to confirm a prophecy. They set out to do science, to measure, to document, to explain, and one by one, as the data refused to fit any natural framework, they faced a moment of decision. Do you follow the data to where it leads? Or do you stop before it arrives somewhere that changes everything? Some stopped, filed no papers, said nothing publicly, returned to work. Some followed the data, and ended up in Jerusalem, waiting. There is a wall in that city with 2,500 years of history built into its stones. A gate sealed by an empire to stop a promise. Maintained in that sealed state through war and politics and religious complexity and the sheer inertia of a world that found it easier to leave it closed. And something is pushing from the other side. Not randomly, not chaotically, in rhythm, in pattern, counting down toward a specific moment in a sequence that was encoded into stone and DNA and atmospheric chemistry and human history before any living person was born. The people who grew up with faith and then watched the world become louder and faster and more dismissive of the things they knew to be true. Those people have been waiting their entire lives for something like this to be undeniable. Not a feeling, not a church service. Evidence. Stone counts that match across 780 years. DNA sequences that encode prophetic dates. Machines that acknowledge what they cannot process. Children who sing in languages they were never taught. The blind who see what the sighted miss. Evidence. Every sign points to a gate. Every gate points to a king. And the king, according to every source that has examined this from every possible direction, is not waiting somewhere distant and theoretical. He is on the other side of a sealed wall. He has been there for a very long time, and the stones that were built to keep him out are running out of time to hold. At 3:33 this morning, every atomic clock in Jerusalem stopped. Not slowed, not drifted, stopped. All of them, simultaneously, for exactly 7 seconds. Then they started again, but they were no longer in agreement with each other. Each clock showed a different time, as if they had each experienced those 7 seconds differently. As if in those 7 seconds something happened that could not be measured the same way twice. The security footage from the Eastern Gate captured at that same moment shows the stone surface of the sealed arch moving. Not a vibration, not a subtle tremor. Movement. The stones expanding outward and contracting back. The motion is unmistakable on the recording. Slow, deliberate, like a chest rising with a deep breath being drawn in. The pulse rate has changed. It is no longer 72 beats per minute. It has been accelerating for the past 96 hours. The seismologist monitoring the equipment has not left the site since the acceleration began. Her latest reading was taken 3 hours ago. She has not shared it. In the Kidron Valley below the Eastern Gate, the figures that were visible only on infrared cameras 3 weeks ago are now being seen with the naked eye. At dusk, at dawn, and now in the middle of the night in clear darkness. Tall, still, standing in formation along the valley floor, facing the gate. Dozens of them 3 weeks ago. The count from last night's observation by 7 separate witnesses who did not know each other and were not coordinating their reports. Hundreds, standing in the valley, facing the gate, waiting. The 888th crack appeared in the Eastern Gate 4 days ago. A clean fracture through the mortar on the northern face of the arch, running from the base of the 7th stone layer upward for 14 inches before stopping. One crack remaining, one stone without a fracture. The final count the Templar Knight described 780 years ago. The stone that when it cracks marks the beginning of what he called the final year. Structural engineers who examined the gate this week noted something in their report that they cannot explain by standard materials science. The remaining unfractured stone is warm, not from the sun. The section in question does not receive direct sunlight at this time of year. The warmth is consistent across the entire face of the stone, from the inside out. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, measured at 6 different points on the stone's surface. The same temperature as a living human body. The chamber beneath the gate, the one the deep earth scans revealed, is producing readings that were not present in the initial survey. The metallic objects in the chamber are active, not mechanically. The density signatures are changing, as if the objects inside have begun to move, or are being prepared. The atmospheric boundary reached 28,000 feet last night. At its current descent rate, it arrives at ground level in less than 2 weeks. Pilots crossing through it this week report the experience has intensified. One pilot, a former Air Force officer with 24 years of flight experience, landed and submitted an incident report that was immediately classified by the airline's safety board. The 3 sentences that were seen before the report was sealed described what he saw when he crossed the boundary at dawn. He saw the Eastern Gate from 28,000 feet. It was open. The children in 17 countries stopped singing this morning at exactly the same moment. Not at the end of the song. Mid-phrase. All of them. Simultaneously. Their parents report that each child stopped, looked toward the east, and said one word before going silent. The word was different in each language, but it translated to the same thing in all of them. Now, the 17 blind individuals who have been watching the gate open for the past 3 weeks have stopped describing the figure as approaching. They are describing it as arrived, standing in the threshold, not moving through it, standing in it, as if waiting for one final thing before completing the crossing, as if the last stone needs to crack before the last step can be taken. One crack remaining, one stone. The pulse behind the sealed wall has reached a rate that the monitoring equipment was not built to measure at this speed. The seismologist recalibrated her instruments twice last night. The chains above the gate arch are no longer swaying. They are pulled taut, horizontal, as if something on the other side is drawing them toward it with force. The graves in the Ottoman cemetery have stopped sinking. The path is clear. At dawn this morning, a tour group, led by a guide who has worked the Temple Mount for 15 years, arrived at the Eastern Gate for a scheduled visit. She placed her hand on the warm stone the way she has done every morning since this began. She pulled it back immediately. The stone was not warm. It was hot. and beneath her hand, through solid rock that has not moved in 500 years. She felt it, a single pulse, stronger than anything the instruments had recorded, and then a sound, deep, resonant, coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. She turned to her group, opened her mouth to speak, and the recording stops. The camera that captured it, a tourist device pointed at the gate, shows the image go white for exactly 3 seconds. When the image returns, the guide is standing with her hand pressed flat against the stone. Her group is frozen. Every person in the frame is looking at the gate, not at each other, not at their phones, at the gate. Something happened in those 3 seconds that the camera could not record. The footage has been submitted to 3 separate analysis teams. None of them have responded. The gate is still sealed, but the last stone has a hairline fracture running through its center that was not there yesterday morning. 888 cracks behind it, 1 crack in front, and something on the other side that has been waiting for 2,500 years. Still waiting. For now.